I think we can start this webinar. Welcome. Welcome all. Welcome to the annual Open Markets Committee, our annual get-together of AIB and RECS International, of the issuing bodies for GEOs and the participants of the GEO market. So thank you for spending time with us today. It's wonderful to see that we have over 150 participants registered. However, I see that the attendees are not yet all there. But even if you are remotely interested in guarantees of origin in Europe or in energy attribute certificates, you have come to the right place, as we have some interesting topics on the agenda. It is an agenda that AIB and RECS have jointly put together. I am co-hosting this with Adam White, who you all know. He is the director of RECS International, where he leads on research and advocacy to support the development and implementation of national and European legislation on GEOs. Adam also supports RECS International's members and other stakeholders to engage in renewable energy markets. Adam, welcome to host this with me.
Thanks very much, Lisbeth. Yeah, it's been great putting this together again. It's a shame we can't see each other in person like we did last year in Luxembourg, and because of that we have a slightly shorter agenda, but I think we have some great topics to go over and some great speakers, so we're really looking forward to it. Thanks to all the RECS International members who've joined, and also to obviously all the AIB issuing body representatives. It's great to have this connection between market participants and system operators, and we're looking forward to the next couple of hours.
Yeah, indeed. So for those who don't know me, my name is Lisbeth Switten, and since the 1st of August, I've taken over from Phil Moody as Secretary General of AIB. I have been involved within AIB for over 12 years as a member representative, and later as a professional reviewer, regulatory advisor, chair of the reviewers group, and chair of the project team Change. But those who know Phil understand that I have basically an impossible task to fill his shoes. And those who don't know Phil are probably coming from Mars. So anyway, it's an honor for me to moderate its Open Markets Committee, which we have set up around 4 topics: the revised CEN Standard, of the revision of the CEN Standard, timestamping, certification of other energy carriers, and some general market improvements. So for each slot, there will be a short presentation followed by a poll question and a possibility for question and answers. And at the end, if time allows, the speakers will answer more questions from the audience. I hope the sound quality works for all of you. And if not, please drop your comments in the chat, and we can see how we can assist. Next slide, Adam. Yeah, I guess you all know the AIB. For those needing a quick introduction, we are a European non-profit organization. We're based in Brussels, and we bring together the issuing bodies for electricity GEOs of 26 countries, and we have now also opened our association for gas issuing bodies. So AIB operates the EC standard for GEOs, which forms the basis for the European EN 16325 standard, which is currently, as you know, under revision before it becomes mandatory under the RED II, the European Renewables Directive. So as many of you know, both RECS International and AIB have been highly involved in drafting input for this revision in the FastGo project, which Katrien will tell you more about. And together with Adam. But all of our members have implemented the EC standard, and their registries are connected to a hub operated by AIB, and that's a platform through which all the transfers of GEOs pass. The scope of AIB geographically is the European Union, the EFTA countries, and the contracting parties of the energy community. This year, we welcomed Portugal back as a member. They were connected to the hub since August. Hub connection was also established for Serbia only 2 weeks ago. We're really happy to have the first contracting party of the energy community now full on board. And we welcomed Latvia as a member. Next week, probably, the issuing body AST will start issuing EC certificates. and will be connected to the hub. For now, only for imports. No, I have to correct myself. They will be connected to the hub for imports, and will start issuing EEC certificates as soon as the final disclosure legislation is entered into force, which will happen fairly soon, and we will obviously keep you updated on that. Bulgaria and Montenegro have applied for membership, and we are in talks with the Energy Community Secretariat and find that there is very much interest of the contracting parties in joining the AIB, just like Serbia did, and to do so in parallel with a union-wide third-party agreement with the contracting parties of the energy community, as you know, as required on mutual recognition of GEOs under the RED II. There is also, recently we have also been speaking with the Turkish and Moroccan ministries of energy, which are currently outside of the scope of AIB, but also there is a very big interest in setting up a decent certification system, and they have future plans for a GEO system that is connected to the European system. So as most of you know, AIB has also done some major work to be prepared for gas GEOs by adding a gas scheme to the EEC framework and participating in the Regatrace and Certify projects. Pelle and Wouter will tell you more about this topic later on. You might also know that we had an internal reorganization within AIB, and since February we have a new organizational structure in place that allows for independent decision-making for issuing bodies, specifically for gas and electricity related topics where needed. But also we still have the structure of harmonization around generic energy certification topics like we always had. So this change process has been a long and lengthy process actually, but it was a process of co-creation, as we always do within our association. We always strive for harmonized solutions that are to the benefits of all members, and that respect the national specific issues that each of our members has. So it is good to see that we now have our new organizational model have rolled out and that it's put into practice. And tomorrow, actually, as a next step, we will elect a new board. Can I have the next slide, please? Another topic that may be of interest is that we recently changed the way we are collecting statistics. We have changed this to monthly figures. So yesterday, the statistics until the end of October 2020 were published. And thanks, Phil, for putting this together once again. So you can see the figures are quite impressive. They are published on our website, obviously. And despite COVID-19, we see that in 2020, already 726 terawatt hours was issued with GEOs, which is actually quite close already to last year's 749 terawatt hours. Cancellations are even higher already than last year, with 663 terawatt hours of RES GEOs being cancelled until the end of October. We also see that internal transfers mounted to 816 terawatt hours and international transfers over the hub up to 476 terawatt hours. But for more information, check our website. You can find it if you go there and then you tap on facts, market information. You will find a treasure of information about geostatistics in Europe. And I can tell you that we're working to improve that information all the time. Now, AIB is always happy to cooperate with RECS International. We have mutual interests, and the dialogue between our two associations is highly appreciated, both by the issuing bodies and the market players. There are many evolutions, not only in legislation, but also in the market. Things like hourly matching, for instance, which Tom and Ilona will elaborate on. And as with all things, there is always room for improvement, and Jared will elaborate on some trends and aspirations. But first, I would like to thank Phil. As you know, AIB's founding father has retired as Secretary General, so Phil has contributed greatly in setting up the European GEO system. Since 2001, he was our Secretary General, and AIB was actually formed after a successful test of a voluntary certificate, the RECS certificate system, which proved the viability of international energy certificate systems. So this developed into the EEC standard as we know it today. And with this forms also the basis of the actual CEN standard. I don't tell you a secret if I say that Phil is widely respected by all stakeholders in the geo sector, always open to answer questions, offering suggestions for improvement, keen on developing and fine-tuning the geo system as a whole. Obviously, within AIB, we're really grateful for all his efforts over all this time. And even after he left this summer, he showed his vision within the FastGo work. For instance, in the layout of a future vision for an IT system. Now, as COVID-19 has prevented us from hosting a decent party yet, we have launched a farewell newsletter specially for him, to which many of those present today have already contributed. So for 20 weeks, Phil now receives video messages from all over Europe with personal thank you messages. And I think Jared wants to add a message to that. You know Jared Brzezowski as the leading expert on the attribute tracking systems such as the United States REC, European GEOs, and the global IREC International REC Standard. Jared has played a leading role in the development and the growth of the GEO system over the past 12 years through his work with RECS International. Jared?
A lot, Lisbeth, I appreciate it. So I won't take very long, but indeed, I've been in the industry now for longer than a decade, and that whole time period, Phil has been a little bit in the background as well, of course. So not a little bit in the background, very much so. So I've got a lot to thank for the experiences from Phil and learning from him over these many years. And I just want to take a quick moment to thank Phil for all of his efforts and all of his times over the last time period. Working with RECS International through many different, now many different Secretary Generals, many different board members as well. So on behalf of RECS International, definitely a big thanks to Phil for all of your time, all of your effort, and all of your support over the last 20 years within the AIB. RECS International will be providing you, Phil, with a small gift. So please make some room in your house because it's going to take up some space. No. Kidding, it won't take up too much space, but just expect that after Corona has subsided a little bit. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jared. Let's now launch our discussions. Next slide. So before that, let me say that if you have questions, please put them in the chat and say who it is directed to. We'll already try to answer as many of them as possible, as we have obviously limited time today. So now let's kick off with an update on the revision of the European standard, the CEN 16325 on GEOs. I don't think Katrien Verwimpt needs any introduction. She has been involved within AIB for many, many years now, first as a member representative with roles as a chair of the Working Group Systems and of the Working Group Internal Affairs. She is she's also one of our trusted professional reviewers, and she chairs a professional reviewers group. She's also coordinating AIB's work on sector integration, for which she is really the driving force. And I think it's fair to say that Katrien is a specialist of sector coupling, maybe even in Europe. Katrien has taken up the role of project leader of the FastGo project for AIB in a solid and enthusiastic way. And she's also representing the AIB in the CEN process, which can be quite challenging at times. And Katrien, tell us all about that.
Thank you, Lisbeth, for this extensive introduction. And yeah, telling you all in 5 minutes may be a bit challenging, but I tried to capture the headlines and also a little bit for the background for those who are not following all of that exhaustive or extensive process that's ongoing. So thanks. Let's dive into the next slide. The CEN standard revision, why is it so important overall? It originates with the Renewable Energy Directive having a statement saying that member states and designated competent bodies shall ensure that the requirements they impose on their guarantees of origin systems comply with the standard EN 16325. And this standard needs to be transposed. Our member states, this Renewable Energy Directive needs to be transposed by 30th of June 2021. What is this standard about? It's a standard on guarantees of origin related to energy. That's what it says in its title. It has been drafted in 2013 and had a minor update in 2015. But a revision was opened this year in February. And that was necessary because although the title says it relates to energy, it actually relates currently to electricity guarantees of origin. So it does need an upgrade to multiple energy carriers as the Renewable Energy Directive does. It needs to include also guarantees of origin for gas, including hydrogen and heating and cooling. It also needs a bit more updates towards the Renewable Energy Directive and integrate improvements from practice, as the EECS rules also did over time. And as Lisbeth already pointed out, the CEN Standard originally was already built upon the EECS rules. Phil was one of the co-drafters of the original version of the CEN Standard. This revision is ongoing in CEN Standard in Joint Technical Committee 14, Working Group 5. And it's also sponsored by Joint Technical Committee 6 on Hydrogen and Energy Systems. But this Working Group 5 in CEN Standard is looking at the revision. And how is that structured? That working group doesn't have any decision power, but it provides recommendations to the national standardization committees who eventually will be voting on this. So the text that will be recommended by Working Group 5 is eventually the text that will, through the Joint Technical Committee 14, be circulated for voting by all national standardization committees. And those then are influenced by their experts and contributing parties, their members, who jointly, depending on the member state, decides what their country's vote will be. Further, how is Working Group 5 structured? There is a plenary meeting of this Working Group 5 that phrases the recommendations. It tries to do so in consensus, which proves to be extremely challenging. It contains subgroups, a generic subgroup for the generic part of the standard, and a subgroup for electricity, for gas, for hydrogen, and for heating and cooling. And then there is the steering group containing the chairs of each subgroup, 2 members of the CEN Secretariat, the convener being Daniel Paul from Bertelgats, and myself. I'm also invited in the steering group on behalf of FastGo, as I'm the project leader of FastGo. So where does then FastGo come in? FastGo is a project. It's a 1-year service contract with DG NR from the European Commission. We lead it with AIB, but we are supported strongly by the organizations that you see in the logo in the middle of the lower part of the screen. And it consists of 6 task packages, of which 2 relates to coming to a support for this CEN process with a text proposal. FastGo provided a text proposal for this standard. You'll find it on the link on your screen on the right side. On 8th of July, after broad sector-wide consultation, we provided also consultation reports and arguments. And the headlines of this proposal is basically base also the future version of the standard on the EECS rules, though keep the operational details flexibly adaptable between issuing bodies. So ensure the main reliability principles to be installed so that all geosystems have the same quality level, but allow operational details to be just maintained at the national level between issuing bodies bilaterally and through a coordination like organizations as AIB. Just like the EECS rules, it proposes a generic guarantee of origin system for all energy carriers, which is, Pelle will also explain later why it's so relevant, energy carrier conversion being the main driver for that. But it does also provide room, a few pages per energy carrier, with a section per energy carrier that allows for the details for electricity, for gas, for hydrogen, and for heating and cooling to be their own, to have their own identity. It extends the definition of disclosure, being the purpose of guarantees of origin, beyond licensed electricity suppliers. It allows other parties and suppliers to participate in the concept of claiming the origin of renewable energy, also of non-renewable energy. And it allows an issuing body at import to ask for a geo scheme assessment of the originating country. It has high-level provisions on disclosure statements and supervision, just on the high level that aims to ensure that there is no double claiming of the same amount of energy attributes. And in the same level of consumer trust, also there, the perimeter for geo-issuing and for disclosure of the attributes should be the same. Further, there are some recommendations on financial fraud prevention, also FastGo connected closely with tax authorities, and on their explicit advice, some texts have been integrated relating to that. Next slide, please. So people might ask, what is the future role of the EECS rules when CEN standard is there? Is there still work left? Well, yes, we can say the EECS, while CEN provides principles for reliable guarantees of origin, the EECS rules ensure that these principles are implemented in a reliable and efficient way. So they facilitate reliable and efficient operation and cooperation between issuing bodies. So EECS goes beyond the CEN standard. It contains operational details, especially those things that need to be adaptable over time. It facilitates IT conveyance of international transfers and joint needs on that field. It also has a platform for sharing experiences between issuing bodies, and it has standard procedures for robust decision-making, allowing issuing bodies to co-create future cooperation systems, which clearly are a handicap of the concept of Working Group 5 in CEN. On the other hand, there will be still work for AIB when the CEN standard is implemented, because the current version of the committee draft in CEN is going beyond EECS. On some fields, it would add a data field on the guarantee of origin that relates to the dissemination of the physical energy. Is the energy injected into a certain type of grid? Is the gas transported by vehicle? Some basic information on that field. It contains geos for heating and cooling. I'll have to make a decision for to go there. In EECS, the big discussion roadblock in CEN is how to disclose geos relating to hydrogen that has been blended into the gas grid. And it seems that this discussion is not yet converging, unfortunately. And then there is the concept of the perimeter of import and export to be the same as the perimeter of the residual mix, also to be synchronized with how that is dealt with in the EECS rules now. So there is work for issuing bodies, but the current basis of operation is most likely to stay the same as we are used to under the European Energy Certificate System. Looking forward to Adam's reflections regarding what is the impact for market parties.
Thanks very much, Katrien, and it's been great to be a participant in the FastGo project. I think it's really supported the development of the standard as positively as possible. From RECS International's perspective, obviously, as many of you would have heard me say before, our main objective with the development of the standard is to support the harmonization and standardization of systems and markets for geos in all the member states, which we all know not to have been completely achieved yet. We're certainly moving in the right direction. We have been since geos were first included in European legislation in 2001, and then again in 2009, and now with the current 2018 RED 2. But we recognize that there is still some scope for national regulations and differences between member states that we will continue to work to try and minimize, so that the market can work as effectively as possible for all RECS International members. As Katrien says, obviously, one of the key challenges we face, apart from that potential for ongoing difference between some member states, is the certification of hydrogen. That's not historically been a speciality of RECS International. Obviously, we've focused on electricity geos, but it's something we are engaged with and trying to ensure that as an effective a solution is found as possible, so that the standard as a whole can move forward and hopefully be put into place in time for the end of the implementation period for RED 2, which is obviously the end of June 2021, so the end of June next year. Another point on which RECS International engaged heavily and was something of a challenge on the electricity side was how to manage the certification of electricity which may not be injected into the kind of wider public grids that exist. And there was some debate over how best to do this, both within FASCO and then within the CEN electricity working group as a whole. And the conclusion we came to, which we hope is one that can work for everybody, is to include a label on the certificate denoting the dissemination level of the electricity. So that's currently included in the draft standard as an annex. And we hope that that moves forward with the rest of the standard and gets some support from national committees. We've also historically supported the ability for non-suppliers to cancel GOs for clients in all countries, which is not necessarily going to be achieved through this standard. We understand that there's some potential fraud concerns around that, but it's something that we know is important to RECS International members, particularly those who support clients in a lot of different countries, to be able to really enable them to use GOs as effectively and efficiently as possible. So that's something we will continue to engage with the AIB on. And obviously, finally, it would be remiss of me not to say that our overarching goal is to ensure that there's consumer trust in the GO markets and systems. We think that a robust standard can really help to achieve that. And the really driving reason for having that trust is to ensure that we can get more and more demand for GOs, and that demand can support the rollout of more renewable energy and the acceleration of the energy transition. So that's really the basis on which we engage with this standardization process as a whole. So with thanks to Katrine for her presentation and for the ongoing collaboration between RECS and AIB on the standard, we now propose to ask you a poll question, which I will put on the screen, but also try to launch in Zoom as well. So if you give me a moment, can you all see this poll on your screens? Yes, perfect. Okay, so panelists as well have the right to answer. You can see what do you consider a priority regarding the revision of the CEN Standard EN 16325? Is it its timely delivery? Is it accommodating efficient market operations, supporting trust for consumers, or harmonization of the principles of markets and systems across the EU? So we'll give a few more seconds. We'll give it 1 minute, so another 30 seconds to answer for everybody. Okay, great. So everyone who wants to answer seems to have answered, and we can see that there's a clear support for harmonizing the principles, which we also agree with, obviously, and trust for consumers. So thank you very much for that clear answer. Yeah. I'll end that poll.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And maybe Katrine, you would like to react to that? That the priority seen by the audience is harmonization of the principles?
It's an interesting sign. It's clear in the CEN that there are on several topics, but especially on one big topic, quite opposing views on in what direction the principles should harmonize. and especially the discussion on the details of blending hydrogen into the gas grid seems to illustrate this. Actually, the problem there is that this discussion also relates to the design of the future green gas market and the greening of the gas grid. And that design is still ongoing, and legislation on that subject is also still ongoing. But while some parties want to avoid irreversible effects of letting things too open for the future, and some parties really want to leave things further open for the future, and or want to have it in a very specific direction. So this in itself proves sometimes to be the reason for a time delay in the delivery. Especially this specific topic has made it that harsh that several of the monthly plenary meetings in Working Group 5 have been fully hijacked by this specific discussion, and make it difficult to proceed on several other topics because this discussion keeps on going. So a solution sometimes could be like, let's some principle downscope a little bit and leave something open for a future version. But on the other hand, the more that can be harmonized, the stronger, of course, from in the beginning, and the more efficient in the future. So I personally would agree it's important. And also, especially consumer trust, it's also good to see that is seen a major criterion, also because, well, if consumers don't trust the system, then why actually are we here? Then the market is blown up anyway, then there's no reason for existence, basically. And a problem in CEN could sometimes be the fact that consumer organizations are very underrepresented in the participation of the revision of the CEN standard. That's why we try to convey with several parties also the concerns that might raise with consumer trust, and I think we are succeeding in doing so.
Yeah, I think you have a very valid point there. Consumer trust is what we need to have this markets function, and it has been functioning so far. If we see the past years, the market has raised by 10% each year, and consumer trust is raising. So a robust standard is indeed should accommodate that trust. Adam, do you have anything to add to the result to that poll question?
No, I think Katrine and I have spent sufficient time together, both in FASCO and CEN meetings, that we're pretty well aligned. So I would agree with what she said. Yeah.
I can. Well, maybe Adam, what is would you call one of the important lessons that you have learned so far from this CEN revision process? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think the thing that I learned this having been the first time I've worked on a CEN standard of any sort is that you can't put all your eggs in one basket, and that the work will continue kind of on an ongoing basis to make these markets as effective as possible, because you know, the standard itself leaves some space for, as we said, some national difference, and that's kind of an ongoing process to try and achieve perfection, I guess, and that's never kind of a goal that you reach. So yeah, the thing I learned is that we'll be working on this for a long time, and I look forward to doing that work, because I believe strongly in the capacity of these markets to drive the energy transition.
Yeah, thanks. As I see no other questions in the chat, and I don't think there are any in the Q&A as well. I invite all participants to please launch your questions you should have to Katrine or Adam, if that wasn't clear. But I think then we can move.
In the meantime, it may be interesting to just briefly say that it's good to see in the poll questions also that all 4 answers are represented amongst the audience, and I think it's also relevant. The timely delivery is also a definite concern of quite a lot of countries, especially those who have to implement it. If you're expected to have the rules in place on 30th of June next year, and given the status of the process now is already that's the earliest, more or less, date that the standard could be public or could be available. So yeah, I do understand that raises some concern. It kind of already obliges countries to bring the implementation of the standard to secondary legislation level, like in primary legislation, just phrase something like GOs in our country shall be compatible with the CEN standard, and then delegate the responsibility for making it compatible with the CEN standard to another level of legislation or another organ
Yeah.
in the country. So that is definitely an aspect.
Yeah. Thanks for that reflection. I think you have a very valid point there. So yeah, thanks. I think it remains a very interesting and actual topic for all of us who are attending today. We're all very curious where the process will bring us, and yeah, we look forward to having that end product that we can start implementing nationally and also within AIB. See how we can then work together and jointly keep on harmonizing these details. As obviously also the CEN standard involves all energy carriers. So yeah, thanks for your input. I suggest that we go to the next topic then, which is also something that's really a trend and one of the developments to observe. It's the temporal granularity of GOs, and you break your tongue over the word. Several large market players are indeed asking for this or have even started implementing hourly matching of electricity. For example, earlier this week, it was reported that Vattenfall and Microsoft are implementing such a solution in Microsoft's new data center in Sweden. Also, the Danish issuing transmission system operators EnergyNet has implemented a pilot system of GGOs, granulated GOs, an open source system that's scalable, where end consumers can open up their ledger and check the energy source of the electricity they are consuming. Most of us also know the Energy Tag initiative that has been launched, aiming to standardize such a timestamp internationally. It's a development that's ongoing, that raises a lot of interest, but also raises a lot of concerns. And Tom Lindberg will tell us more. He's the managing director of ECOS and a member of the board of RECS International. We know Tom as a great communicator who always follows up the trends carefully and has a critical mindset and always delivers some on-spot comments to it. So Tom, please give us your views on timestamping. You told me that it involves many partners and covers a lot of ground. I'm interested to hear it.
Thank you very much. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I have spent 12, 13 years managing ECOS. ECOS is one of, well, it's been around for the same period of time. It's been a provider of GOs and EACs in Europe and across the globe, using all the accepted, approved standards. Lately, we've been working the last 5, 6, 7 years with a growing number of ambitious corporates, and my views are really my views. It's not necessarily facts, but these are opinions based on the impressions that we've had with a lot of these companies the last few years. So with that backdrop, I want to just touch on 4 points quite quickly. Just about the concepts of matching timestamping, a little about the market needs, which Lisbeth already briefly touched on, a bit about my view on system implications, what it is not, and then lastly, what we might see as kind of market reactions or concepts at the end of the day. Then going back to point 1, the concepts. As most people know, EACs or guarantees of origin in Europe, they balance around a year on a yearly basis. It means that buyers, they match consumption and production on an annual basis. So we are already matching and doing this, but we're doing it primarily on an annual basis. The last 2, 3, 4 years, actually, there's been a growing interest to move from annual to monthly. We see it actually in a few reporting standards on the member state level. We see it increasingly among large corporates who want to get closer to their to match consumption and production on a more granular level than annual. Going beyond that, we now see a much stronger push for further granularity. We see people want to going from months to day and further to hourly matching. Now, when moving from monthly and daily, which can be matched and delivered using the existing EAC or GAO structure and the system that we actually have in place today, while that could be done with the monthly and daily, which we are already doing, moving down to hourly or even to 15 minutes matching, this requires more data. So in its simplest form, we're lacking the data to do that type of a matching. And the data we're lacking is a timestamp. We have already today in the GOs and other EACs, we have a period, a date, but we do not have a time in most of the systems. So with a timestamp on the EAC, it is possible then to match production at a very, very granular level. And that's basically the direction we want to go, and we see that a lot of corporates want to go. Now, to point two, Lisbeth already mentioned Microsoft. Google and a number of other ones have already launched their initiatives, so they're showing that they're very impatient. They want to move further, and the question is kind of why do they want to do that? And I think there's a few reasons, but mostly I think it is about being ahead of the pack. I think a lot of them want to show leadership. I think they want to show that they are kind of not just following the market, but defining the market and showing leadership. We also know that initiatives like RE100, they incent by defining leadership criteria. And I think granularity or kind of hourly matching is one of those that will kind of be driving some of the leader companies in one direction. I do think that the perception is that we are going to have a more accurate matching when we move to hourly or beyond. And it will add credibility to the buyers of energy, but it's also going to add credibility and trust and a positive perception of the GO system and other EAC standards. I just want to touch on one thing, because a lot of people throw around the concept of real-time matching. It sounds super nice, but that means that everything needs to actually happen exactly at the same time during 1 hour. In my world, it's not necessarily what people want, and it's not necessarily necessary to do it either. So you need to issue at a timestamp at an hourly level, but to do the actual matching and report this back to a customer can happen after the fact, actually after a GO is issued. So I think that is probably the way we're going to go, and I do not necessarily believe that everybody's willing to take the resources or bring the resources on board to do real-time matching. My point 3 was about systems and technology. It is always a lot of discussions about, well, the GO system or the EAC is built on old platforms, old technology. Well, to be honest, it really isn't the fact. I think this is partly kind of technology agnostic. It can be used, new technologies like blockchain can be used if it works, but also traditional IT technology can easily deliver this if we choose the right technology to do this. One thing which I do think is underestimated is not necessarily the actual technology platform, but the actual capacity of storing GOs at a single GO level instead of in bundles. Now, also the transfer of every single GO as a separate entity instead of in bundles is going to put a lot of pressure on some of the existing systems if that is the way we go. That would entail using the GO as a carrier of the timestamp, which is an option. It's not the only option, but it is an option. The last thing I wanted to just mention is from a market provider's perspective, what we are going to see is when a market window shrinks, we all know that creates less room for products to fit. Now, a consumption profile that fits into a month is smaller, and the production volumes that fit this profile is less. Moving to daily and to hourly will make these windows much smaller. It means that there will be much more volatility, especially since the production profiles going in are variable. They're coming from renewable sources, and we do not really, it's difficult to predict the actual production volume from wind and solar. So we're going to have a lot more volatility in those very shrunk market windows. Volatility increases risk, and risk increases, or at least creates, volatile pricing. So volatile pricing is probably going to what we're going to see, but also higher pricing. So we will see a completely different price picture in this type of a world, and not everybody will be very comfortable in that world if that risk isn't managed. So we're going to look at more complex, more admin, and more complex reporting to make this a kind of viable option, at least for the very ambitious corporates who choose to go this far. That's pretty much what I wanted to say in this round.
Okay.
Questions later would be okay.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Highly interesting. Now I give the floor to Ilona Bruns, who is since July this year, she's the head of CertiQ, the Dutch issuing body, and long-standing member of the AIB. Ilona comes from an accounting background and has joined the regulatory affairs unit of the Dutch TSO Tenet before following in the footsteps of Jan Vorink and Jan van der Lee, to name but a few. CertiQ has already some practice with regards to time stamping. So Ilona, please tell us more.
Thank you, Lisbeth. First, we don't have many experience with timestamping, to correct you. We are participating in the Energy Tech initiative. And as if Tom already explained the principles of timestamping, I want to first go with you back to last Friday, to the Dutch newspapers. And what they heading were like, I read it in front of me, green electricity isn't always green. Another one was, part of energy suppliers continues with greenwashing, politics must intervene. And they're all referring to the GO system, and in their view, the system don't work correctly. And I'm very against this view, because this system does actually work really great. But in the past, there's explicitly chosen for a European system, and so we may use each other GOs. And of course, electrons and molecules do not stop at borders, and the GO system is part of it. So yeah, we have to think international, and therefore the system is good. Something else is what people are expecting, and also Tom referred to that earlier, is that, and it hits timestamping also, is that they want to exactly know when and where the sustainable energy is generated. And that is just a matter of transparency. And no one could be against transparency, I think. And the current GO system is in that respect maybe a little bit outdated, because the information the consumers want in the energy transition, and it's just my assumptions, it's three parts, and to have one is to first have local information. The second is knowing the actual national amount of renewables. And third, of course, we're living in a digital world with a lot of data available. And if these aspects are really important to consumers, then timestamping could help. But these are just the assumptions from my side, and we have to check by the users of the GO system what will the behavior switch of this will be when the information is available at the GOs. Are they really wanted to consume more local sustainable energy and just pay for it when we look at GOs? Does timestamping stimulate storage? I really don't know. And what will be the reaction of the generators will be? Is there something like demand side response? I have no clue. but that is something that we have to find out. And we can do this by pilots, and we can do it by a basis from a voluntary system. But in my view, the current GO system should continue doing her job because it is a good system. And if we know from the pilots, for instance, what the behavior switch will be, and when this plays an important role in the energy transition, then it's time to integrate timestamping in the current GO system. And if you look at for the CETQ operations, what will be the consequences if we say to each other, so let's do timestamping tomorrow? Then we have a problem for CETQ because we are not able to do so. Tom mentioned it already, there will be a lot of more data. We have to prepare ourselves for that because the biggest challenge is to handle with this continuous stream of data. The metering data will be now at least 700 times more than nowadays. And that's just quite a challenge, and not only for us. So in my opinion, we have to try, of course, but also to get clear what the behavior of the consumer will be. And we also have to be keen to have a really roll-out phase so every party can prepare itself for the new situation when timestamping is in place. So that's mainly my vision about timestamping. I think we have to go back to the poll, but I'm not sure if Adam or Lisbeth.
Yes, please, Adam, could I please ask you to launch the poll? It's certainly that this timestamping is still in its early stages, and in order to achieve temporal granularity, what do you think as the audience? Should a timestamp come in the form of an optional data field on the GO, a mandatory field on the GO, maybe as a separate certificate, implying cancellation of the GO, obviously, or don't you have an opinion on this? And Adam, can you keep us updated on the answers, as I don't see these?
Okay, yes, you don't see it as it progresses. Okay, yeah. So we have around 50 people having answered so far, which was about the number of people who answered last time. We can probably leave it open for another 5 or 6 seconds. Okay, I'll close the poll now and share the results.
Okay, there's a clear majority, or no, well, yes, a clear preference for the time stamp to be an optional field on the GO. Who of the panelists wants to reply to that? Ilona, Tom? Tom, maybe?
All right. I'm kind of happy to see that. In my world, since we are already doing matching using the GOs on a monthly and daily basis, and this works quite well, I would prefer, and I'm not saying it's possible, I'm not taking into account technical challenges, but I think it makes more sense to use the existing infrastructure we spent 20 years in building, and to enhance this infrastructure and the GO standard with this type of a timestamp. I think is good for the standard, but I also think is good from a kind of investment point of view, and it's good for the customers. So whether it's optional or mandatory, well, I think in the CEN Standard, I was hoping that there would be a mandatory field, but there would be an option whether each country was able or willing to fill it and use it. But getting the field actually in the standard would have been super good.
Yeah. Thanks for that view. There's also quite some opinions and questions coming in. We have a few more minutes for this topic, so I tried to name one of them. There's an opinion that from Lieven Bloejaert that timestamping requires more data handling and storage, and so he's maybe questioning the motives why Googles and the Microsofts of this world are pushing for timestamping. It's a thought indeed. And then Rudolf Schedden from Comerc reacts, supporting Tom that indeed increased granularity might lead to losing credibility and use the GOs. So this is too early. Rudolf thinks it's fine-tuning measure, but the market is not mature yet. And then the next step is indeed to support the demand side by lobbying for full disclosure. It's indeed an opinion to consider. Maybe a question. How do you integrate the application of storage into timestamping? Are there scientific studies on how important timestamping actually is for consumers? So far, I'm not really aware of such scientific studies. Maybe Tom, you have really dived into the matter. Can you?
I'm not going to say I'm an expert in this, but I think this is what I would think, that these type of questions are probably the ones which the new initiative Energy Tag is trying to handle. And I think Energy Tag is an initiative where a number of the same people on this call probably is involved. And it's basically gathering about 150, 170 interested parties from all over the globe, corporates, issuing bodies, technology companies. And I think these type of companies are exactly the ones that we need to handle and to answer when trying to establish this type of timestamp standard. So I think for me, it's a bit early. I'm not really in place to have such a strong opinion about this.
Okay. Then there's indeed a very valid question. How do you see the hourly or 15-minute production periods working with the 1 megawatt-hour size of GEOs? Yeah, it's a question indeed. If you work with a large hydro, this might maybe work, but it's not obviously not something to match with all energy sources. Do any of the speakers have an opinion on that? How do you see the hourly or 15-minute production periods working with the 1 megawatt-hour size of GEOs?
Also quite a challenge, of course, because when we get over to kilowatt hours, yeah, then again, more data is involved in this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, there's two ways to do it. One is that you actually break up the megawatt hour into smaller pieces like a kilowatt hour, or the principle is basically that we should have a very small asset producing very little energy, that you will just count until you actually have a megawatt hour, and then you stamp it. And if that takes longer than an hour, then it takes longer than an hour. And I know my solar panels on my house, it will take more than an hour to generate a GEO. So I mean, that's still an option. You don't get hourly stamping or time stamping on an hourly basis if you don't produce it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, again, timestamping is a trend to observe. The developments are ongoing, and I'm sure that we will hear quite a lot about this in the future. Let's not forget that we're talking about very conscious consumers, and market systems that are highly evaluated yet, whereas in some parts the geo system is only started. So it also involves the risk of creating a big divergence in the geo market, and that must also not be forgotten. I think we can go to the next slot and then take some more questions on this highly interested topic later on. The poll results can be closed, I think, Adam. So, as I mentioned earlier, AIB is now welcoming the issuing bodies for gas geos. We have a gas scheme group set up, which has already met 6 times this year, and I'm really happy to have Pelle Derevecki joining us for explaining the work within AIB. Pelle holds a master's degree in organic chemistry, and he works for the Swedish energy agency, Energimyndigheten. He was one of the first to join AIB's meetings about gas, and he has shown a deep knowledge on gas and a very valuable representative in this respect. Afterwards, I will give the floor to Wouter van Hout. Wouter is a commercial engineer by background with a master in financial management. Wouter is a director within Hinicio, a strategy consultancy in sustainable energy and transport, which is running a hydrogen competence center for over 12 years. Wouter coordinates the multi-stakeholder certify project since 2014. And this has achieved a widespread consensus on a definition of green hydrogen, and is now in the third phase with EU-wide implementation. Wouter will talk a bit more about that later. He's also currently the chair of the AIB gas scheme group. But first I give the floor to Pelle. Pelle, please, could you tell us some more about the work we have done within AIB on the certification of other energy carriers? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisbeth. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me good. Yes, thank you, Lisbeth, for introducing me, and thank you for being able to speak here in this open market committee. As Lisbeth said, I have been from the start of gas scheme group, joined the gas scheme in the beginning. But during that time also, as Lisbeth mentioned, the AIB has started going through a reorganization to be more future-proof organization, more agile, flexible organization, with a little bit faster decision making and moving away the big decisions from the GM meetings to downwards in the organization. This resulted in that the general meetings have moved all decisions to a very strong board with residual powers. And as the scheme groups that have been created for electricity and gas have nowadays their own budget and decide on specifically in subjects related to their area, gas or electricity. Across those gas streams, you have different units: ESE unit, external affairs units, and information system unit, and there's an open discussion platform available also for when it's needed. What has happened in the existing in the AIB is that all existing AIB members are appointed members to the gas scheme within the country. Also, a number of appointed issue bodies have joined the gas scheme group. All members, all within the gas scheme groups today are observers or apply to become ones. And the gas scheme group is a very dynamic atmosphere with lots of thinking and entrepreneurial spirit. So as Elizabeth mentioned, in September 2000, the ESC in September 2018 have decided on the energy carrier conversion, which I will mention a little bit later on the next slides. Also a month later, in 2019, November, a new chapter in the CE rules has been added, chapter O, specifically for gas scheme. And in February 2020, as Elizabeth also mentioned in the very beginning, there has been changes in the Articles of Association internal rules, and upon approximately that time, the gas scheme group was formalized with existing members as observers. We can kick to the next slide. So we can just, because it's animated, we can just click it forward precisely. Oh, no. Yes, that's. So what does the ESC certificate look like? There's a generic section for all certificates, and there's an additional section for gas certificate, and of course there's an additional for electricity. And in the future there will also maybe be for heat and cooling as well, but the generic one is more or less is stable for all the certificates. So you have all the information you need on the certificate geoed or issued. And also there's a lot also added optional data fields which are not required to add into the geo when you're issuing it, but can be good for others to have, or can be implemented, or can be in the future become mandatory. Also, what is good to mention is that the attributes on this can also change a little bit to more or less coordinate with the CEN standard. So this is also in the ongoing to see how to meet the CEN standard. We can keep to the next slide. So yes, thank you. we can wait until one more. I think it is a. So this slide will present why the generic geosystem for all energy carriers is needed, or it's in simple words, you can make the geo conversion issuance. To have a generic carrier system, normally you can see a geo system that you produce your energy carrier, you transfer it to the consumer, and it's done. And now when you have for example, for one type of energy, but there's also possibility technologies to convert one type of energy carrier to another conversion, and having the same energy geosystem or generic geosystem for all of them. We will simplify the whole process of traceability, prevents double counting, issuance and disclosure disclosure issues. This also is one way to say that the definition of the energy conversion is that to transfer energy from one type of energy to another type of energy carrier, and having one system will make it easier to do that kind of transfer. What can be said about in the AIB system when you do the conversions issuance is also that the energy sources from the origin will be carried out forward with the new geo. Also all the supported data accumulated will also be added to the new geo. So if you have one support scheme for one production device, it will be added to the next production and so on, so on. And I think that will be good for this slide. We can click to the next one. So what's happening in the Gascon group? What's the work plan? What's the next steps in our so this the Gascon group will continue work on further development, and of course the Gascon group will add more issuing bodies and more members, and most probably most of the observers will become a full member in the Gascon group. There's also going to be a process continue going for the next one for ESC development and fine-tuning implementing the ESC gas stream. There is a continuous working with Certify, Regitrace. Lots of us in the gas stream are also involved in the FastGo project, and of course there's also the external representation for AIB gas stream group also involved. And that's approximately what I had to say. If there's Lisbeth or Katrine have something else to add.
No, thank you, Pelle. Indeed, it's we're happy to have the gas scheme group set up with so much active participants, which are both, as you said, existing AIB members and observers. And at present, we're really looking forward to have the first formal applicants to become a member of the EECS gas scheme, and the first EECS gas GEOs being issued, hopefully in the near future. Thanks for that. And Wouter, can you tell us more about the Certified project and hydrogen geos?
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I don't know whether my camera works.
It works fine.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So maybe some people are wondering what I'm doing around in the AIB gas scheme group. And I think the justification is the fact that I've been working on a hydrogen geo scheme back since 2014. We've been working on a program that was financed by the European Commission to develop a hydrogen scheme for renewable and non-renewable hydrogen. And in 2014, of course, there was no mention yet within the RED II that member states would be mandated to issue GEOs for hydrogen at a local level. Now that the RED II comes into play, we would really like to share all of the knowledge that we gathered so far, and bring in that knowledge within the AIB's gas scheme group. Next to that, I think the first phases of the project have been focusing a lot on the regulatory framework. The second phase has focused a lot on the measurement techniques into the hydrogen industry, which is a non-regulated industry. So it's very different than the electricity or the gas world, which is regulated and where typically third-party independent metering devices available from gas TSOs or DSOs. And that's what has been the focus on those phases. I think it's the third phase where we would really like to focus on interacting together with the market and together with market users. And this is what I would like to show into the next slide, please. And so the certified stakeholder platform is made out of different working groups. Traditionally working group 1 up to working group 4. As I mentioned, the people dealing with regulation has been very active in the first phase. The hydrogen producers have been very active in the second phase in working group 2, but we already have a working group 3 where the users are being represented. Can we go to the next slide, please? Because I think we switched to the former slide again. And this is really the group where I would call upon people within RECS to join this working group, because we would like to hear from you what you would expect from specifically hydrogen GEOs. What are the market features that you need? And I think and we will need them for a good reason, because we would like to also develop a voluntary issuing body, and as you can see on the next slide on the right hand side. Can we go to the next slide, please? So where you see a typical GEO stack, where you have RED 2, CEN Standard, ECS, and then on top national implementation. We are willing to make an issuing body as an independent criteria scheme or independent scheme criteria. And all of the data fields that Pelle has been showing as potential data fields like greenhouse gas emissions, but we know that certain member states are reluctant to implement them already as of today. Well, we will create an issuing body that carry forwards those elements and put it to the availability of the market. We're not only into the gas scheme group, of course, to develop our own issuing body. We're willing to help the gas scheme and all of the domain protocol templates to be developed. And we already, or the European Commission is providing budget to help this domain protocol being implemented into 4 domains, being Austria, Wallonia, Flanders, and the Netherlands. I think it's interesting to note that in the Netherlands, it's Vertogas, which will be the renewable gas issuing body. And that will also be a first pilot of the implementation of this gas scheme. And I think out of these pilots, we will definitely have some learnings and potential updates to be made to a gas scheme V1, V2, V3, and so forth and so onwards. Last but not least, I would like to say that hydrogen certification is not only taking up by the European Commission at the European level, but it's also being taken up at the international level, where the Clean Energy Ministerial and IPHE, which is a government-to-government association, has already a task force to establish a worldwide hydrogen certification standard. And there we will also be providing the results of all the work done since 2014. Last but not least, on GEOs, the RED 2 is mentioning that the European Union can make an agreement for mutual recognition with GEOs from countries outside of the EU. Well, we will be doing a first capacity building, not more than that, because the budget doesn't allow, together with Morocco, to also see how hydrogen GEOs can be interchangeable between Morocco and the European Union. And that's in a nutshell what Certify is trying to establish in the upcoming 3 years.
Okay, thank you, Wouter, for that. Thank you. We have interesting developments going on, and yeah, we're really looking forward to that. I would like to raise the following poll question. What actions should be prioritized to support the further development of markets for GEOs for gaseous energy carriers? Would that be more market information or transparency, a clearer legislative framework, a joint system coordination by issuing bodies maybe, or something else? Please cast your answers.
So I can see the answers coming in. We have around 30 answers already, so we'll let it run for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's a topic that for some of the participants may be not so, they may be not really involved in this yet. So as the attendees are mostly in the electricity geo market.
Yeah, indeed. We're up to 45. So in a couple of seconds, I'll close the poll. Okay, I'll close it now and share with you the results.
Okay, that's I would say a clear answer. A joint system coordination by issuing bodies. That's something that's indeed felt quite useful. Does any of the speakers want to react to this?
I can react. I think it's a really clear message that we have a coordination between different issuing bodies and within the, maybe even within the same country, but also within the whole European Union. And that is a little bit also connected to a clearer legislative framework to understand the different issuing bodies and how they work. So I think it's very clear how we should proceed.
I'd like to add to that. I think right now, especially when we have a look at biomethane GEOs, which have been implemented a little bit on an ad hoc basis into various member states, we see that there's a real issue on cross-border trade, because depending on the domain, the definition of the biomethane GEO is not the same. And I really think that the new CEN standard should provide part of the solutions. Everything that we're going to do into the gas scheme is going to allow for one further level of harmonization. And I think the way that the AIB has been set up together with its AIB hub is a great way to coordinate amongst issuing bodies.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, indeed, we are faced with a situation where not every country will have the same issuing body for gas GEOs as for electricity GEOs. Currently, there are 6 of our members who have been appointed also as issuing body for gas. It's Austria, Flanders, Wallonia, Estonia, Portugal, and Italy. But in those countries where there are separate issuing bodies, obviously within AIB, we are striving for the best possible cooperation. We're also in close dialogue and cooperation with the ERGAR, because we also see that the need that there is a harmonized approach and that there is coordination between issuing bodies. So yeah, that's really something from the AIB side that we value a lot, and for which we have also launched a program internally, the sector integration program, which will also focus on that. So we have a clear strategy to work towards this joint GEO system that will also relieve our own members from burdens that may come with the fact that there would be separate issuing bodies for separate energy carriers. I think maybe we can close this topic for now. Please feel free. Sorry?
Could I just add that
course,
in the framework of our cooperation with different parties in the field, we have a good forum in AIB, a very strong forum in AIB, and as Pelle mentioned, it's a very dynamic group, the gas scheme group. But apart from that, we acknowledge that there's also a lot of dialogue ongoing on gas certificate development outside of AIB, and we also follow that up. We follow up the prime movers group on gas geos from NSOG and GIE, the gas infrastructure providers. And we have also very close cooperation with ERCAR in several projects we work together, and our dialogue is intensifying. We are seeing that each has its own strengths and that there is a lot of benefit in cooperation. And that it goes very, very well to cooperate. Also, the Certified project in which we are engaged, as Wouter already mentioned, shows that everybody has its own strengths, and that, yeah, just complementing the strengths together in a strong cooperation really will be the driver for a future system on gas certification.
Yeah, thanks for that addition, Katrien. Yeah, you're spot on with that, obviously. So we were going to move to the next topic, but should you have questions or discussion topics you want to be touched upon after by our speakers, we have a slot of Q&A after the next speakers, and we are really welcoming all your questions or opinions. Please raise them in the chat or in the Q&A tab, and we'll get back to you after the next speaker, which is Jared. He will give some suggestions for general market improvements, some requests from the market. So Jared, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lisbeth. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I heard some hesitation maybe in your voice, Lisbeth, because you know, when market players start coming with requests, they're not always easy to fulfill, but I think a lot of the times we know some of them are more challenging to fulfill. We know that some are outside of the control of the AIB, that some are considered legislative barriers, some are policy barriers, some are IT barriers. There's all different types of barriers, and we recognize that not all of them are under the control of the AIB. That said, the AIB is kind of the gateway for market players to reach out and at least express these problems. Now, we can do that with national governments, and we do, but we know that the real opportunity for getting this solved is with your members, the issuing bodies, but also, of course, with just more general communication around these topics. So I think a lot of these have been on the table for many, many years, even sometimes, but I think that doesn't make them any less important, and that doesn't mean that we should take them off of the list. So these shouldn't be seen necessarily as criticisms. They should be seen as just reminders for ways in which we can all improve the system, which is eventually our joint goal, I would say, to have a really well-organized, functional, and reliable tracking system for market players, but primarily for end users across Europe. So that's really a critical aspect. So this is not criticism. This is more suggestions and areas for discussion in the future, I would say. I wanted to start more broadly, however, maybe just before you, they all went apparently, maybe you can click back very quickly, Lisbeth, just very quickly. I wanted to talk about not necessarily the European Guarantee of Origin system or the EEC system or anything like this. I want to talk about what makes a good tracking system. Now, there's Guarantee of Origin type tracking systems all over the world, as Lisbeth mentioned. There's the European Guarantee of Origin system, there's the US RECS system, there's the International RECS Standard, and really it comes down to these are all doing the same general function in a slightly different way. But what we've been able to see, especially market players more so than market facilitators have been able to see, is the unique ways these have been implemented around the world. Now, one thing that I think AIB members have to realize is AIB members are focused primarily on their national implementation and to some degree on European implementation, but to a very, very little degree with implementation around the world. But this isn't happening in some bubble. I mean, the implementation of the GEO system in Italy is great for Italian end users, but there's a very, very large portion of Italian end users, as an example, that also consume renewable electricity in Germany and the Netherlands, but also maybe in the US, and also maybe in Brazil, in Chile, in India, in China, and taking lessons learned, which market players have to do from around the world, we can take a lot of experiences and implement those in Europe. And one thing that we've seen around the world is that there's a few elements that make a really good energy attribute tracking system. There's 5 main aspects. One is a clear separation of roles. You need to have market facilitators like the AIB and like issuing bodies as independent facilitators. And that's something that the AIB has done phenomenally over the last 20 years and has really become an example in for the rest of the world, that these issuing bodies are appointed by governments and essentially are independent operators of these various markets. And issuing bodies can be any type of organization, from TSOs to regulators to even for-profit entities, but their independence is secured under the AIB and under the rules and regulations of the European Union. So this is really top-notch in Europe, really done very, very well. The other aspects that make for a good tracking system could have some improvements. Those are things like clarity in rules and regulations. Now, we're doing pretty well in Europe, but there's definitely room for improvement, which we'll get to. There's fair treatment of all parties. We don't really know, and we do have some concerns related to the fair treatment of all market players across all of Europe, and I'll get into that as well. There is responsive and knowledgeable market support. Now, responsive and knowledgeable market support, some issuing bodies have really responsive, really supportive staff, others don't. And that is a bit of a concern when you're trying to develop a market. You need responsive and knowledgeable support. And the last is the quality of the IT systems. Now, some of the quality of the IT systems in Europe is second to none globally around the world, globally and around the world. It's really high quality systems, but others are just lacking, and that's the reality. And they need to at least try and work towards a higher level in the coming few years. So if we click the next button, Lisbeth. Or Adam, apologies. Yeah, Adam, thanks. So that's the first one. Moving to the clarity of rules and regulations. So there is a concern in Europe related to the various disclosure deadlines. And again, this is not something that we're unfamiliar with. This is something that's been on the table for quite a long time. And it's something that I think a majority of the stakeholders on the call today would have hoped would have been part of the CEN Standard, but clearly has not. CEN Standard was not able to provide clarity on disclosure deadlines across Europe or on trade deadlines. So that means, you know, you have to have 25 different countries or however many countries are adherent to EECS or using the guarantee of origin system, all with different rules and deadlines. And of course, some of them do have standardized rules, some of them do not, but it makes it extremely challenging for clarity. And there's no very good reason why this could not be standardized in the coming 5 years. This is something that as European member states, we should definitely work to provide some harmonization on this point. The next aspect is related to, Adam, if you could click. Fair treatment of all parties. So the fair treatment of all parties requires that requirements. We do have a number of different concerns, and these concerns are primarily related to non-residents. And this is something that we've been talking about for quite a while in a number of different aspects. Just one moment, please. Apologies. So thank you for that. Apologies for that. But a number of different problems are related to the non-residents being able to hold accounts. This is something that we've talked about in Europe for quite a while, in a number of different member states as well, including in the Netherlands, for example, where I'm based. It was well known that only local parties could open accounts. And to be quite honest, this is Europe in 2020. There shouldn't be any barriers to, based upon where you are registered, to where you are able to register your specific accounts. You should be able to register accounts across Europe without having to be a resident of that country. And potentially an even larger concerns is that in some markets, only certain entities can trade GOs. GOs are made to be mechanisms for proving claims to end users. And a number of markets, and primarily Germany is the largest concern, but there are other concerns as well, where you have to be a specific part of the physical electricity market, a registered supply company, to be able to redeem GOs on behalf of clients. And that is extremely challenging in some cases. Next slide. Is responsive and knowledgeable market support. So there is the concept of providing more centralized support, and this is something that we are interested in looking into with the AIB. When a market player calls an issuing body or sends an email to an issuing body, they should be able to get timely and responsive support, but that is not always the case. Some of the issuing bodies are slow to respond, or they respond sometimes with different information at different times. And this is a location where we could definitely try to improve in the coming time period, in the coming few years. After that, there was also the idea of having statistical improvements, as mentioned under FASCO, and this is something that we can look into as well moving forward. Next is the quality of IT systems. And this is probably the largest area where improvement is possible among the issuing bodies, because oftentimes this is not a policy concern. This is not a policy concern. This is more of just an IT quality concern. And the first and most logical issue is being able to amend your own data, your own rights, and making sure that your commodities, your products, your assets on the registry are safe. And there's been a number of concerns represented from a number of market players that the registry quality varies significantly. And one aspect is with large batches. We've seen that large batches of transfers or movements of certificates in some registries can essentially freeze the system. It takes a long time to process, is extremely slow. There's no reason for this to be necessary in 2020. It's just a matter of improving the IT systems. The other very significant concern is that we have reports from market players that some trades between registries temporarily, I should say temporarily, lose their access to certificates. So these certificates either disappear or are not seen, and they have to contact the registry administrator to be able to retrieve those certificates again. And this is obviously something that is a bare basic fundamental of organizing these markets. We need to have reliable asset transfers and being able to do that in a secure manner. The other thing that we may want to think about is we recognize that it's going to be impossible to have a single European registry like you do for the European emissions trading system, but maybe we can work towards having centralized interfaces. This is something that could be looked at in the future, where the interface at least is the same. You have to recognize right now from a market player, you might have to deal with 25 different registries, logging into 25 different accounts with 25 different passwords, usernames, security protocols, filling in 25 different types of forms and viewing this information in 25 different types of ways. There's no real need for this, and there's no real benefit associated with them either. So it's something that is very possible to review in the future, looking at centralized interfaces to make sure that there isn't this just unnecessary replication of work across all these various member states. The next two are really looking at making the systems future-proof. And the first is about APIs. Allowing registries to have API integration in the long term. We know there's a number of systems in Europe, including the Norwegian system, that have very functional and very good API systems developed. And this is something that could be looked at across European member states with their guarantee of origin registries, and potentially even looking at to API standardization across the AIB. So again, just like we don't have 25 different interfaces, market players don't need to potentially create 25 different APIs. Having single types APIs would be quite beneficial. An API standard for the European or for the European issuing bodies. And the last is, of course, something that we've already talked about today, looking at the possibility to allow for more detailed or granular information, potentially on the temporal basis or the time basis, but potentially also for other types of information as well. So it's not just about temporal granularity, it's also just about more general granularity on the certificates themselves. This is definitely something that can be looked at in the coming 5-year period. A lot of these, I think, can be implemented rather quickly. A lot of them just need to remain on the discussions. And this is kind of where I feel that things sometimes go incorrectly. The RECS International provides a lot of these comments at the OMC, and we revisit them every year, but it is something that we feel as market players really needs to be addressed on a more structural basis. What is possible, what needs to be done, and how can we address these issues, and in what time frame can these issues be addressed? And looking at that together with the AIB would really be beneficial in the long term to make sure that market players and end users are getting the right type of market facilitation that they expect in these guarantee of origin markets. So that's a little bit of my introduction to kind of improvements in the system, whether on policy or IT standpoint. And obviously, I'm happy to take questions at the end as requested.
Thank you, Jared. And from the AIB's point of view, thank you for these concerns from the markets. And we realize indeed that there's always room for improvement. On the other hand, you must also realize, of course, that all our issuing bodies are just basing themselves on their own national legislations. They're all working within their own regulated framework. So it's not always easy to have all these improvements and on a fast pace. As for the your concerns are duly noted, but obviously we should also look at the context of the legal context and the regulatory context for which we faced, and also obviously with the budgetary context that a lot of our members are operating in, some only having a GO team of 2 or 3 staff members available, and then it's really hard to keep that customer service at the highest point. And obviously from the AIB's point of view, we are trying to assist the members and to assist the market parties with the highest customer friendliness we can provide. So, but we'll keep on having this dialogue, and the concerns are always very welcome, as you know. So basically, I would like to invite all speakers to put on their cameras again and to take some more questions. But first, we will launch a next poll question. Regarding potential market improvements, which change would most improve the GO market? Would that be to lift the restrictions on account ownerships and cancellation on behalf of clients? Maybe more transparency on price information? Another tricky one, a central registry for cancellation? More use of APIs for data sharing. APIs are pieces of software that you can implement in several registries so they can interact easier. Universal time stamping on GOs maybe, or carbon footprint information on GOs. Which would have your preference?
Okay, we see lots of responses coming in, which is great. We're already up to 45 responses. We can give it a bit more time perhaps, because there's a few options to think through.
I don't know whose Geigerteller is running in the background.
Oh, that might, sorry.
That's fine. Just curious.
Okay, so we seem to have all the answers, so I'll end the poll and share the results.
Okay, that's an interesting one, to which I think many of our speakers will want to react. So we see a preference for lifting the restrictions on account ownership and cancellation on behalf of clients. Yeah, this is indeed a question that is often asked, but from our point of view, we also think about fraud prevention. And obviously, we are always about maximum fraud prevention, and ownership of the GO is always quite important to us. Maybe, I don't know, somebody else of the speakers would like to react to this most interesting reply.
I can react. I'm a market player. This for 10 years. It's really one of the biggest problems in the GO market, and it has not improved at all. I have brought it up along with Jared and RECS International at least 5 or 6 times on the OMCs, and so far nothing happens. And in the CEN Standard work, nothing happens. It's still going to be allowed for the countries to decide themselves to lock out parts of the markets. So in my view, I'm really happy to see the poll going this way.
Katrien, maybe, do you want to reply?
Yeah, I was waiting until the unmute button kind of showed itself. I definitely understand concerns of market parties. I also understand views of other parties. There are different parties involved in this aspect here. Some relate to disclosure competent authorities, which set the rules in their countries in such a way that they are able to supervise all the parties who disclose or who cancel GOs and match that with their disclosure figures. So that is definitely one element. Account ownership, explicit tracking of the account owner and linking the account owner with the actual owner of the GOs is indeed something that now pops up in the standard. And it came through the FASTCO advice after explicit request from the tax authorities on VAT fraud monitoring. And they want to, in order to be able to detect the fraudulent parties on the market, they need to be sure, or there needs to be a way to track who has held a GO in its hands, even if it's ex post. And also for the majority of the market parties, the bona fide parties, it is important that parties with tax fraud intentions are detected and kind of blocked from the market, because you can also be involved in VAT fraud carousels without knowing it, and getting a blame on yourselves if being engaged in such transactions. So you have to be very careful who you engage with in itself. So that area, that it's quite a huge work area, the tax fraud prevention area, and especially the billion fraud of the 2008 emission certificate market has really been an illustration of this. So that's an element to take into account there. That being said, it's pretty hard for a standard, or for even a voluntary standard like EECS, and also for a mandatory standard like the CEN Standard, to oblige countries to allow all types of parties. What such standards can do is facilitate all kinds of parties. But if a country explicitly determines in its national legislation narrowing down the rules, then it's pretty hard to enforce them through such a standard to do otherwise. Note that the mandate for organizing the GO systems in Europe explicitly is given to the national legislation. It's not something that is coordinated top down. It's really, the coordination happens bottom up. So it's voluntary cooperation with systems that are nationally regulated and issuing bodies that are nationally regulated. So enforcing such would kind of top down, almost legislative requirement, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for that, Katrien. Indeed, that's indeed the situation within our members. we could maybe jump to another of the possibilities, of which 1 in 5 participants thinks that's relevant, which is more transparency on price information. We know indeed that this is also a request from the market to have some more transparency in this respect. Anyone wanting to comment on that? Kathleen again, maybe?
I can also say something about it. Also in FASCO, we observed that there are different views around the table. There are some people who are worried about sharing more price information, but there's also a big demand on such. The only system that we know of that currently publishes price information, average prices of monthly traded GOs, is the Flemish system, where in the law the issuing body is obliged to publish the average transfer price on its website, and that causes the issuing body to transfer that responsibility also to the market parties, to the trader. The sending party of a transaction has to input in his in the registry inputting his transaction the price that relates with the GOs in that transaction. And there have been questions, is that reliable information? In Flanders there has been some investigation, and it turns out yes, it is pretty it's a reliable information. Market parties have shown to in general report real prices. They have to monitor these prices or report these prices also in their accounting systems, and they have usually internal audit systems that match these bookkeeping prices with those that they put in the registry. So in general, that proves to be working. But all the issuing bodies in general have usually positioned that it's not so easy to publish price information if you don't have such a mandate to do so.
No. And indeed, there are some, that's also one of the questions in the Q&A, whether there are sources of market information on GOs. There are indeed a few commercial sources for prices on GOs. You can find them on our website, or maybe Jared or Adam, you would like to say something?
Yeah. Maybe one thing about this as well is that I think it's all about how you look at the guarantee of origin market. And I think if you're trying to determine a price for a guarantee of origin, you're treating the guarantee of origin as if it's a commodity, but it's not a commodity, it's an individual product. Every guarantee of origin is unique. Wind coming from Belgium is different than wind coming from the Netherlands. It's different than wind from a new installation. And an old installation, it's different from wind that's 50 kilometers from where you're purchasing, where you consume electricity, from 100 kilometers from where you purchase your physical electricity. So it's all these different factors really create a unique individual product. And to say that there is a price for the guarantee of origin, yes, there is a price, but it isn't a commodity price like you would expect for oil or for physical electricity. And that makes it extremely challenging. And the other challenge, I think, as well, is with long-term agreements. I mean, a lot of these long-term agreements are paired with physical electricity prices or with other types of sustainability services, and then being able to differentiate the price that is paid specifically for a guarantee of origin in a specific month, in a specific year, over a multi-year agreement is really, really challenging. So the information that you're going to get is always going to be a little bit challenging to receive. That said, there is an interest among market parties as well to have some sort of baseline information. And that's something that a number of market parties are working on. Also for contractual reasons, it's helpful to have a baseline price for the guarantee of origin more generally, but there has to be a recognition among the issuing bodies, but also among market players and also among stakeholders, that price transparency is not the same as it is for example, an EUA. An EUA is the same price across the whole market. That will not be the case for the guarantee of origin.
Yeah, I fully second that. And that's also the experience in Flanders, where so far there has been a distinguishment in the prices of the Flemish production geos and the non-Flemish or all geo prices. And indeed, in some months it shows really a difference between the two, but it would make sense, a lot more sense to have that further differentiation. Of course, whenever you make further differentiation, there come up concerns of some market parties who say, yeah, but I'm the only one trading in this specific type of geos and I want to keep confidentiality on what I'm doing. So there has always to be some balancing out of that confidentiality preservation and the general transparency, but that's also a feasible thing. I see a reaction in the Q&A that Flemish market prices would be an aggregate of current and historical trades. Well, there is a statistic that shows the aggregate of the current and historic trades, but there's also a statistic where there is the transaction price per month of the actual where the actual transaction took place in that month, and you can simply select the month in which you want to see the transaction. So that information is available per month of transfer, and you can also compare the months with each other.
I would like to add maybe one thing with regards to hydrogen geos, which are going to be a completely new thing, and there is no price reference at the moment. It's possible that through this European Commission paid project that an auction could be launched, so that at least a couple of price points will be known to the market, even though we think it's not the role of an issuing body, and there's typically other organizations along the value chain which could provide those services. In the case of hydrogen, there are also associations, in this case, the Industrial Gas Association, where all of the hydrogen producers are putting their volumes and their prices, making them available to the association. The association is aggregating, anonymizing that information and providing that back to the market, but we don't have any vision yet how that could be working for geos. This is only for the physical production of hydrogen into what's currently still a B2B market, because it's not a commodity yet.
Yeah, that's indeed very, very interesting, Wouter. And on the topic of auctions, we have also seen the introduction of more and more auctions within our members. Currently, there are auctions in Italy, Luxembourg, France, Croatia, Slovakia, Serbia. We'll be launching them. And there indeed we see that these results are obviously published. So there you can find some information on prices of geos as well. Is someone else willing to reply to then maybe something on a very sensitive topic, carbon footprint information on the geos? Who would like to say something about that? Katrien and Adam, what are the plans within CEN on that respect?
Adam, you go, or should I report something?
Yeah, you go first, and I'll add to what you say if need be.
In CEN, this is also one topic where there are very opposing views. There is a strong lobby for mentioning carbon footprint information on the geo. Especially the strongest lobby is in the hydrogen sector, where there is also a big share of hydrogen that is non-renewable, and where the carbon information relating to that hydrogen production is very relevant to bring forward towards the consumers. On the other hand, it is acknowledged that it has been difficult for the issuing bodies to find the harmonized methodology. AIB has been working on this area and put it kind of stopped this work, because after 2 years it proved not to be very feasible in the framework of a few years ago. In a few months, it may change. DG Ener is also reorganizing, is having more dialogue with DG Klima on the interplay of EU ETS and NGOs, and that will make sense. But there is also people asking not to put the information on the geo so far until Europe has provided a harmonized methodology.
Indeed, I think it's a very tricky issue. And Adam, maybe you can say briefly something, and then I think we need to move also to the conclusions of this webinar. So Adam, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree with what has been said, and having said that, it is something that we remain interested in, because as you will have heard from Jared and I many times, the key value of the guarantee of origin is the information it can provide to consumers. This is a piece of information that many consumers are obviously interested in, particularly when differentiating between biomass use for electricity generation, for example, and the potential carbon footprint of that, as compared to wind or solar or other generation types. So recognizing the challenges in actually achieving it in practical terms, it's something that as we say, we remain interested in, because of the value it can provide to consumers.
Yeah.
If I might, I would like to jump in very quickly. As already mentioned by Catherine, the hydrogen industry has been interested in that for a long time. That's why the Certify program has been looking into greenhouse gas allocation methods, which is the real difficulty to put that data field on a GO, especially when you have multi-input and multi-output plants. Management or allocation methods have to be decided upon. There's many methods possibly, and we have to make a choice. And that's why in the hydrogen world it's been decided that it's going to be developed. It's existing in the Certify program. For various production pathways, greenhouse gas allocation methods do exist. They are published. And whether they will be taken up by governmental issuing bodies or not, Certify is willing, through this independent scheme criteria, to add the data field to the GO.
Yeah,
and the data and the greenhouse gas allocation methods will be published, available for everybody.
And that would be a great step forward, I think, for everyone. Okay, we're nearing the end of this webinar. Concluding, I think we're really living in challenging and interesting times. It will be very interesting to see what CEN has in store for us if it gets adopted in 2021, when it gets adopted, and further ahead, what the impact will be of the revision of the RED II on the geo system, maybe. Certification of other energy carriers will certainly take a flight next year, and there are legislations under development in almost every member state, and in this respect, we'll also see sector integration obviously having a huge impact on the future market. And then there's still evolutions like time stamping on the geos, which need to be observed. I would like to thank all of you for attending this webinar. Adam, do you have to add anything to that?
No, just to say thank you so much. There was a bit of panic on our side just beforehand when we were struggling with the polls and some other things. So I'm very glad that it went off smoothly. It's great when these virtual systems can work for us in these difficult times, but obviously we're looking forward to seeing you all in person next year. We hope by this time next year at the very latest that will be possible again. And also just a bit of a plug from our side to invite you all to follow the REC Market Meeting website for the meeting we're planning towards the end of 2021, the 6th and 7th of September in Amsterdam, as usual. So we hope that if not before then, we'll see each other face to face again then, and to thank you all for the great interactions with the polls and all the questions. We could obviously continue this for much longer, which is why we often have some social aspects around the OMC most years, but not this year, but again in the future.
No, thank you indeed to all speakers. Thanks for your preparations, for the great interaction. Thanks RECS International for our cooperation. And let's meet in person in 2021. Have a nice rest of the day, all of you. Thank you.